Please, don't kick me. I'm already hurt. The words fell from her lips like broken glass, each syllable cutting through the restaurant's polished silence. Tears streamed down Maya Johnson's face as she stood in the kitchen doorway, her uniform stained with spilled coffee, her dignity hanging by a thread. The manager towered over her, his face twisted with contempt, his finger pointed like a weapon. You're done here. Pack your things and get out. Around them, the kitchen staff had gone silent, some averting their eyes, others watching with expressions that ranged from pity to satisfaction. Maya's hands trembled as she untied her apron, 23 years old, and watching her last hope dissolve into humiliation. She had begged for this job 3 months ago, promised she would work harder than anyone, that she wouldn't let them down. But working hard, she was learning, meant nothing when the game was rigged from the start. What Maya didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the quiet man, washing dishes in the corner, the one they called Ray, and dismissed as just another struggling immigrant, was actually Raymond Chen, CEO of the restaurant chain that owned this location and 47 others. And he had been watching everything. What happens next would shatter every assumption in that kitchen, expose a truth so devastating that 3 people would lose their jobs. One man would lose everything he thought defined him, and Maya would discover that sometimes angels arrive, wearing the disguise of the invisible. Maya had grown up in the Bronx, raised by her grandmother after her mother disappeared into addiction when Maya was 7. Her grandmother, Lorraine, had worked 3 jobs to keep them fed, cleaning houses during the day, stocking shelves at night, and doing laundry for neighbors on weekends. Lorraine never complained, never spoke of the indignity of it. But Maya had watched her grandmother's hands grow gnarled and swollen, had seen her fall asleep at 8. The kitchen table with her head on a pile of folded clothes, too exhausted to make it to bed. When Lorraine died of a heart attack during Maya's senior year of high school, collapsing while scrubbing someone else's bathroom floor, Maya made herself a promise. She would never let her grandmother's sacrifice be meaningless. She would get educated, build a career, create a life where she could help people the way she wished someone had helped Lorraine. Maya dreamed of becoming a social worker, of being the person who showed up when families were breaking apart, who fought for children who had no one else. She got accepted to community college, juggling classes with multiple jobs. But then her younger brother Marcus, only 15, got caught up with the wrong crowd. One night of stupid choices landed him in juvenile detention. The lawyer fees, the court costs, the therapy sessions, they consumed every dollar Maya had saved. She dropped out of school to work full-time, sending money for Marcus's commissary, paying for the programs that might give him a chance at rehabilitation. Her dream of social work faded into the background, replaced by the immediate crisis of survival. The job at Bellamy's fine dining had seemed like a miracle. When she got it, the tips were good, the location was in a wealthy neighborhood, and the manager, Derek Morrison, had smiled warmly during her interview and told her she seemed like exactly the kind of dedicated employee they were looking for. That smile, Maya would learn, was a mask that hid something rotten underneath. Derek Morrison had built his reputation on running tight ships. He'd been promoted to general manager of the Bellamy's flagship location after turning around 2 failing restaurants in the suburbs. His secret, though he would never admit it publicly, was creating an environment of fear and favoritism. He rewarded employees who laughed at his jokes, who looked the other way when he made inappropriate comments, who understood that loyalty to Derek mattered more than competence or character. He punished anyone who challenged him, who reported problems, who made him look bad in front of his superiors. Derek had learned early in his career that corporate executives rarely visited the restaurants, that they judged success by profit margins and customer satisfaction scores, not by how the staff were treated. As long as the numbers looked good, Derek could run his kingdom however he pleased. When Maya started at Bellamy's, Derek saw her determination and hunger for the job, and he saw an opportunity. Someone desperate was someone controllable. He started small, criticizing her uniform for being slightly wrinkled when others wore far worse, assigning her the worst shifts, the tables that tipped poorly or not at all. When Maya worked even harder to prove herself, Derek escalated. He began making comments about her hair, calling it unprofessional when she wore it natural, suggesting she should straighten it or wear a wig if she wanted to be taken seriously in fine dining. He questioned her intelligence, asking if she understood the menu items, speaking slowly as if she were a child. Other servers, mostly white and from affluent backgrounds working their way through college, noticed the treatment but said nothing. Some felt uncomfortable but convinced themselves it wasn't their business. Others, particularly Derek's favorites, joined in with subtle jabs and exclusions, creating a toxic culture where Maya existed at the bottom of an unspoken hierarchy. The day everything came crashing down started like any other. Maya arrived early, prepared her station with meticulous care, reviewed the specials so she could answer customer questions confidently. The lunch service began smoothly. She served an elderly couple celebrating their anniversary, making sure their experience was perfect, earning a genuine smile and a $20 tip. She handled a difficult customer with grace, someone who sent back their steak 3 times before finally accepting it. But then table 12 happened. 4 businessmen in expensive suits, loud and dismissive from the moment they sat down. Maya approached with her practiced smile, her notepad ready. Before she could speak, one of them looked her up and down and said to his companions, "I thought Bellamy's had standards. Guess they're hiring anyone these days." The others laughed. Maya's smile froze but held. She took their drink. Orders, her hand steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. She brought the drinks. One of the men claimed his scotch wasn't the brand he ordered, though Maya knew it was. She offered to replace it anyway. As she reached for the glass, he jerked it back, causing the liquid to splash across her uniform. The men erupted in laughter. "Whoops. Looks like you're clumsy too. Better watch out or you'll get yourself fired." Maya excused herself, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall in the dining room. She went to the kitchen to clean up, to compose herself, to remind herself that she needed this job, that her pride wasn't worth Marcus's future. Derek was waiting in the kitchen, but he hadn't seen what happened at table 12. He'd been in his office reviewing liquor inventory when another server, Jessica, had come to him with a complaint. Jessica, one of Derek's favorites, claimed Maya had been rude to her earlier, had snapped at her when Jessica asked a simple question. It wasn't true, but Jessica knew Derek would believe her without question. Derek's face was already twisted with anger before Maya walked in. When he saw her stained uniform, instead of asking what happened, he saw confirmation of his existing narrative. "This is unacceptable. You're a mess. You're making the entire restaurant look bad." Maya tried to explain about table 12, about the customer who had deliberately spilled his drink on her. Derek cut her off. "Are you really trying to blame our customers for your incompetence? You clearly can't handle this job. Maybe you should find work somewhere more suited to your skill level." The implication hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. The kitchen had gone quiet, everyone watching. Maya felt something inside her break, the accumulated weight of 3 months of degradation finally crushing her ability to stay silent. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't get angry. She simply said, "This isn't about my skills. You've been treating me differently since my first day because of who I am. You criticize things in me you ignore in others. You give me the worst shifts and the hardest tables. You make comments about my appearance that you'd never make to anyone else. I've worked harder than anyone here, And it doesn't matter because you've already decided what I am. Derek's face turned red. The accusation of racism, even unspoken directly, was the one thing that could threaten his position. He responded with ill escalation, with overwhelming force designed to silence her completely. How dare you? After everything this company has done for you, giving you a chance when you had no experience, and this is how you repay us. With accusations and excuses. You're fired. Effective immediately. Get out. That's when Maya said it, the words that would echo through the restaurant and beyond. Please, don't kick me. I'm already hurt. The plea wasn't just about the job. It was about everything. The grandmother who died scrubbing floors. The brother in detention. The dreams deferred and dignity assaulted. It was the cry of someone who had been pushed past their breaking point and was begging for mercy from a world that had shown her none. Derek was unmoved. Pack your things and leave. If you're not gone in 5 minutes, I'm calling security. Maya untied her apron with shaking hands, tears flowing freely now. She looked around the kitchen at faces that refused to meet her eyes, at co-workers who had worked beside her but wouldn't speak up for her. The silence was its own condemnation. And then Ray spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried authority that made everyone turn. That's enough, Derek. The room froze. Ray, the dishwasher they barely noticed, was stepping forward. Derek looked at him with irritation, mixed with contempt. This doesn't concern you. Get back to work, unless you want to join her. Ray didn't move back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. For the past 90 minutes, he had been recording. The audio was crystal clear. The comments from Table 12. Derek's treatment of Maya. Jessica's false accusation. All of it captured digitally, undeniable. Derek's face went from red to white. Who the hell are you? Ray set his phone down on the counter and began removing his dishwashing gloves. His movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. My name is Raymond Chen. I'm the CEO of Bellamy Restaurant Group. And I've been working undercover in my own restaurants for the past 6 weeks because our anonymous employee hotline has been flooded with complaints about toxic management, discrimination, and hostile work environments. This location had more complaints than any other. Now I know why. The kitchen erupted in chaos. Derek stumbled backward, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Jessica went pale. Other staff members looked at each other in shock and sudden fear, wondering what Ray had witnessed. From them, Maya stood frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. Ray turned to her, his expression gentle. Miss Johnson, I apologize that you had to experience this. I apologize that it took my presence here for anyone to take these issues seriously. What's happened to you is unacceptable, and it reflects a failure of leadership at every level of this organization. He turned back to Derek. You're terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the building. We'll be conducting a full investigation into your management practices, and any employees who participated in creating this hostile environment will face consequences. Jessica, that includes you. I heard your false accusation. You're suspended pending investigation. Ray pulled out his actual phone, his CEO phone, and made a call. Within minutes, the regional director and HR were on their way. Ray asked Maya to stay, promising she wasn't in trouble, that he needed her testimony for the investigation. She agreed. Still in shock, still not entirely convinced this was real. Over the next hour, as HR arrived and began interviewing staff, the full scope of Derek's toxicity emerged. Ray had witnessed it himself during his weeks undercover. The casual cruelty, the playing favorites, the subtle and not so subtle discrimination. But now, with Derek's authority removed and the protection of corporate oversight present, Other employees began speaking up. A Latina server revealed Derek had repeatedly asked her about her immigration status, implying she should be grateful he didn't report her, even though she was a citizen. A gay waiter described constant homophobic jokes and being assigned to tables where Derek knew customers had complained about being served by someone obviously gay. An older server talked about being pushed toward early retirement through impossible work demands and criticism of her speed. The pattern was clear and damning. Derek had created a culture where anyone who didn't fit his preferred mold was systematically degraded. What made it more insidious was that Derek had been skilled at hiding it from corporate oversight, maintaining good customer scores by pushing all his abuse onto staff who had no power to fight back. Ray listened to each testimony with the expression that grew darker with each revelation. When it was Maya's turn, she told her full story. Not just that day, but the 3 months of accumulated microaggressions and overt discrimination. She showed text messages where Derek had scheduled her for back-to-back closing and opening shifts, giving her only 4 hours to sleep. She described being assigned to sections of the restaurant where customers were known to tip poorly or not at all. White servers got the high-value tables. She recounted comments about her hair, her intelligence, her belonging. Through it all, she maintained her composure, refusing to let them see her as a victim, even though she had been victimized. She was claiming her dignity back, word by word. When the interviews concluded, Ray asked Maya to meet him in the manager's office, Derek's former domain. She entered nervously, unsure what to expect. Ray gestured to a chair and waited for her to sit before he spoke. "Miss Johnson, Maya, what you've endured here is a betrayal of everything Bellamy's is supposed to represent. My grandfather opened the first Bellamy's 60 years ago as a place where everyone, regardless of background, could enjoy excellent food and genuine hospitality. He was an immigrant himself, faced discrimination, understood what it meant to be judged by your appearance rather than your character. I've tried to honor that legacy as this company has grown, but clearly, I failed to ensure his values are practiced at every level." Maya didn't know what to say, so she said nothing, waiting. Ray continued, "I'm offering you your job back, if you want it, with a significant raise and a guarantee that you'll never work under hostile management again. But I'm also offering you something else. I've been looking for someone to help lead our new equity and inclusion initiative, someone who's lived the realities we're trying to address, who understands what needs to change not theoretically but personally. The position comes with a salary, benefits, and the opportunity to help reshape how we hire, train, and evaluate managers across all our locations. I think you could be that person." Maya stared at him, tears returning but different now. Not tears of humiliation but of overwhelmed disbelief. She thought of her grandmother, of the dreams she'd deferred, of the education she'd abandoned. "I dropped out of college. I don't have a degree. I'm not qualified for something like that." Ray shook his head. "You're more qualified than anyone I could hire from a consulting firm. You know what discrimination looks like in practice, in the daily interactions that happen when executives aren't watching. You've experienced the failure of systems designed to protect employees. And you had the courage to speak up even when it meant losing everything. That's exactly who I need." Maya felt something shifting inside her, grief and hope tangled together. "But my brother, Marcus, he needs me. The legal fees, the programs. I can't afford to take a risk on something that might not work out." The salary Ray named was more than double what she'd been making as a server. It was enough to support Marcus, to go back to school part-time, to begin building the life she'd thought was lost. She covered her face with her hands and wept, the release finally coming, months of held tension pouring out. Ray waited patiently, letting her have the moment. When she looked up, her face was set with determination. "I'll do it. I'll help you fix this. But not just here. Not just at Bellamy's. We need to look at the entire industry, at why this keeps happening, at the structures that let people like Derek thrive. Ray smiled for the first time that day. That's exactly the kind of thinking I need. Welcome to leadership, Maya. The changes didn't happen overnight, but they happened. Derek was not just fired but exposed. Ray made sure the circumstances of his termination were documented thoroughly, ensuring he couldn't simply move to another restaurant and continue the pattern. Jessica was also terminated after the investigation revealed she'd made false accusations against 3 other employees, always people Derek wanted gone. The revelation prompted a company-wide audit of management practices. Ray instituted mandatory implicit bias training, but not the superficial kind that checks a legal box. Real training, facilitated by experts, with consequences for managers who didn't demonstrate actual growth. He created an independent reporting system where employees could flag concerns without fear of retaliation, with reports going directly to corporate HR rather than through local management. He changed hiring practices to focus on diversity at management levels, recognizing that change had to start at the top. Maya threw herself into the work with intensity that surprised even her. She interviewed employees at every Bellamy's location, documenting patterns of discrimination and management failure. She worked with HR to develop new evaluation criteria for managers, emphasizing staff retention and employee satisfaction alongside profit metrics. She created mentorship programs pairing experienced staff with newer employees, building support networks that bypassed problematic managers. She advocated for pathway programs that would help service staff advance into management, breaking the cycle of hiring managers who'd never worked the floor and didn't understand staff realities. The work was exhausting and often discouraging. She encountered resistance from managers who resented oversight, from executives who worried about costs, from employees who'd been burned so many times they didn't trust any initiative from corporate. But she also found allies. Servers who'd been silently enduring discrimination spoke up when they saw someone in leadership who understood. Managers who'd been trying to do right, but lacked support, finally had resources and backing. Customers, learning about the changes, supported restaurants that took equity seriously. 6 months after that terrible day in the kitchen, Bellamy's held a company-wide meeting where Ray introduced Maya as the new director of equity and workplace culture. She stood before 200 employees and managers, feeling the weight of her grandmother's memory, her brother's future, and her own reclaimed dignity. She spoke about why the no work mattered, not in corporate language, but in human terms. She talked about her grandmother dying on someone else's bathroom floor, about the casual cruelties that compound until they crush people's spirits, about the responsibility everyone has to create workplaces where dignity isn't negotiable. Her speech was met with standing ovation from staff, an uncomfortable shifting from some managers who realized the old way of operating was over. The changes spread beyond Bellamy's. Other restaurant groups, watching the publicity around Ray's undercover investigation and subsequent reforms, began implementing similar programs. Industry publications ran stories about the initiative, sparking broader conversations about discrimination in hospitality. Maya was invited to speak at conferences, to consult with other companies, to become a voice for change across the industry. She enrolled in night classes, working toward the degree she'd abandoned, now with the resources and stability to pursue it. Marcus was released from detention into a supervised program, and with Maya's stable income and emotional support, he began turning his life around. He got his GED, started community college, volunteered at youth centers, sharing his story to help keep other kids from making his mistakes. The brothers Maya had thought were lost to her father's abandonment, and their mother's addiction became close, bonded by their shared determination to honor their grandmother's sacrifice. living lives of purpose. But the story doesn't end with neat redemption and happily ever after, because real life doesn't work that way. Maya still had hard days, still encountered resistance and prejudice, still carried the scars of what she'd endured. She attended therapy to process the trauma of those months at Bellamy's, learning that survival doesn't mean you're not wounded, it just means you're strong enough to keep going while you heal. She remained vigilant, knowing that systems of oppression don't dismantle easily, that the work of equity is never finished, but must be renewed with each generation. She made mistakes, pushed too hard sometimes and not hard enough others, learned that leadership means being willing to be wrong and grow. The restaurant industry remained imperfect, still struggling with the deep inequities of tipping culture, immigration, exploitation, and hierarchies that often broke along racial lines. But now there were people like Maya inside these institutions, fighting to change them, refusing to accept that cruelty and discrimination were just the cost of doing business in hospitality. Ray continued his undercover work periodically, never announcing it, randomly appearing in kitchens and dining rooms to witness how his policies played out in practice. He learned that good intentions at the top meant nothing if they didn't translate to dignity on the floor. Together, Ray and Maya became partners in reimagining what the restaurant industry could be, what any workplace could be when leaders chose to prioritize humanity alongside profit. 3 years after that day in the kitchen, Maya was invited back to the flagship, Bellamy's location, for a special event. The restaurant had been completely renovated, but more importantly, completely transformed culturally. The staff was diverse, the management was accountable, and the atmosphere was one of genuine respect. In the private dining room, Ray had assembled the team that had been there that terrible day. Some had left the company, but many remained, and all had been part of the cultural transformation. Ray stood and addressed the group. 3 years ago, this restaurant was a place where cruelty thrived because good people stayed silent, where discrimination was practiced openly because those with power faced no consequences, where someone could beg, "Please don't kick me, I'm already hurt," and be ignored. That ends permanently, not just here, but everywhere we have influence. He turned to Maya. This woman, who could have walked away and never looked back, chose instead to help us build something better. She took her pain and transformed it into purpose. She's the reason we're a better company today. The reason employees at 48 locations have safer, more dignified workplaces. Maya felt emotion rising in her chest, but pushed it down to speak. What happened to me happens every day to people in every industry, in every city, in every circumstance where power is unequal and oversight is absent. The only reason my story has a positive resolution is because someone with authority witnessed it and chose to act. But what about all the people who suffer without witnesses? What about all the Derek Morrisons who never get caught? The work we're doing matters, but it's not enough until every workplace, every institution, every system prioritizes human dignity over convenience or profit. The lesson here cuts deeper than one woman's suffering or one CEO's intervention. It exposes a truth about how oppression functions in everyday spaces, how discrimination thrives in silence, how power protects itself through intimidation and isolation. Maya's story reveals that workplaces, especially in service industries, often become microcosms of larger societal inequities. The restaurant floor becomes a stage where racism, classism, and abuse of power play out in daily interactions that go unwitnessed and unreported. The people who serve your food, who clean your spaces, who perform labor you barely notice, they're navigating systems designed to exploit and diminish them. They're making impossible choices between dignity and survival, between speaking up and keeping their jobs. And too often, the people in positions to change these dynamics choose comfort over justice, Choose profit over humanity. Choose silence over solidarity. Derek Morrison wasn't an anomaly. He was a product of systems that reward cruelty when it comes packaged as efficiency, that ignore discrimination when it's profitable, that punish vulnerability while protecting power. For every Derek who gets caught, dozens operate unchallenged, their toxicity accepted as the price of doing business. The servers, cooks, dishwashers, hosts, they endure because they must, because they have bills and families and dreams that require income. They smile through disrespect, absorb abuse, accept less than they deserve because the alternative is unemployment and hunger and watching their loved ones suffer. But here's what Maya's story teaches us. First, that witnessing matters. Ray could have stayed in his corner, could have convinced himself that what he was seeing wasn't his problem or wasn't as bad as it seemed. Instead, he chose to see fully and act decisively. Each of us has moments where we witness injustice, where someone is being diminished or abused, where we can choose intervention or avoidance. The choice we make in those moments defines not just that situation but the culture we're creating. Second, that speaking truth, even when it costs everything, is how change begins. Maya risked her job, her income, her stability to name what was happening to her. That courage, that refusal to cooperate with her own oppression, created the opening for transformation. Silence protects abusers. Truth-telling exposes them. Third, that systems don't change through individual goodness, but through structural accountability. Ray's intervention mattered, but lasting change came through new policies, new oversight, new consequences for discrimination. Personal kindness is necessary but insufficient. We need institutional mechanisms that make abuse difficult and dignity default. Fourth, that pain can be transformed into purpose, but shouldn't have to be. We celebrate survivors who turn trauma into activism, but we should work for a world where people don't have to be traumatized to create change, where their humanity is protected before it's violated. Think about the spaces you occupy, the power you hold, the moments where you could speak up or stay silent. Think about the people who serve you, who work for you, who have less power in the interaction. Are you seeing them? Are you complicit in systems that diminish them? Are you using your privilege, whatever form it takes, to create more equity or to protect your comfort? These aren't abstract questions. They're daily choices with real consequences for real people. The waitress struggling with 3 jobs deserves dignity. The dishwasher working while undocumented deserves safety. The young person begging for a chance deserves fair evaluation. Your role in their experience matters. If you're in management, examine your practices honestly. Are you creating environments where discrimination thrives or where it's challenged? Are you protecting problematic employees because they're profitable or popular? Are you listening to complaints from marginalized staff or dismissing them as oversensitive? Your responsibility is immense because your power is immense. If you're a coworker, are you speaking up when you witness discrimination or convincing yourself it's not your business? Are you benefiting from inequitable systems while telling yourself you're one of the good ones? Complicity through silence is still complicity. If you're a customer, are you treating service workers with respect or as invisible servants? Are you supporting businesses that practice equity or giving your money to places built on exploitation? Your choices matter. If you're someone facing discrimination, know that your voice matters even when it feels like no one's listening. Document everything. Find allies. Report through every channel available. And know that your dignity isn't dependent on their acknowledgement. You are worthy of respect, regardless of whether you receive it. This story isn't ultimately about Maya or Ray or Derek. It's about the choice between A world where cruelty is accepted, and a world where it's challenged. It's about whether we're willing to do the uncomfortable work of examining our own participation in oppressive systems. It's about whether we believe dignity is universal or conditional. The restaurant industry is healing, slowly, imperfectly, but measurably. Because people like Maya refuse to accept that abuse was inevitable. Because leaders like Ray prioritized transformation over reputation. Because employees found courage in collective action. Because customers demanded better. Change is possible when enough people decide it must be. Your life presents you with opportunities to choose justice or convenience, solidarity or self-interest, courage or comfort. The cumulative weight of those choices shapes the world we all inhabit. You can't fix everything, but you can do something. You can see the people others ignore. You can speak when others stay silent. You can use whatever power you have to create more equity. You can refuse to participate in degrading others. You can transform your small corner of the world into a space where dignity is protected. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the invisible people in your life who deserve to be seen, if it challenged you to examine your own participation in systems of inequality, then let it change something. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, with someone in management who might not realize the impact of their practices, with someone facing discrimination who needs to know their voice matters, with someone who's forgotten that every person they encounter carries a full human story. Let this story ripple outward. Let it challenge and inspire. Let it contribute to the slow work of building a more just world. Subscribe to hear more stories like this, stories that don't flinch from difficult truths but also refuse to surrender to cynicism. Stories that remind us we're capable of extraordinary cruelty and extraordinary compassion, and the difference is simply the choices we make. Like and share if you believe every person deserves dignity, if you think workplaces should honor humanity, if you're committed to being someone who stands up rather than stays silent. Because at the end of every day, we have to look at ourselves and answer one question. When someone was hurting, when someone was being diminished, when someone needed an ally, what did I do? Did I witness and act, or did I look away? Did I prioritize their humanity or my comfort? Did I contribute to justice or to oppression? The answer to that question, multiplied across millions of daily interactions, determines what kind of world we're building. Choose wisely. Choose bravely. Choose kindness. Because every story hides a truth, and every truth deserves to be heard.